right. Like it's so important to take that time for yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself and you end up stressed and overwhelmed, you can't
Mhm.
be a good mom or a good partner or even a good business owner, because you're not in a good place mentally, or sometimes mentally and physically. But I
Yeah.
think it's easy when you get really busy with everything that's going on in your life. It's easy to kind of cut your own time out of that. And sometimes it is as
Mm.
simple as you say, as having 20 minutes to yourself. Like lately, I've been really, really busy trying to catch up on everything so that I can take a maternity leave, because it's just been 3 months of craziness. And I've got this list of like, I need to get these things done. So I've been putting in crazy hours. But what I've started doing in the last week is every night I have a long bath. And then I get out of the bath, and my husband bought me some nice like lotion and stuff. So then I sit and like put lotion on really nice and put a nice pair of socks on and cozy PJs. And it maybe takes half an hour. But it's just a nice little routine now before bed. And I feel like that's half an hour just for myself. I don't have
Yeah.
my phone on. Sometimes I've got Netflix on, or sometimes I'm sitting with a book in the bath. But other
Yeah.
than that, it's like downtime for me in half an hour. And instead of working right up to the point where I go to bed, now I have this bath and this little routine. And I think it's actually helping me sleep better. And it's
Mhm.
making me feel less stressed. I'm not going to sleep thinking about all the things I have to do tomorrow, or at least not as badly as I was before.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the key, is just making that 20 minutes or half an hour a day a priority, and not feeling guilty for doing that, because we need it.
Yep. It's permission. It's permission. It's quite often I teach a lot of my patients that who I'm working with is to give yourself permission to look after yourself. And I think you'll be a better all-rounded person if you feel like you take some time for you. An example for me is my dogs didn't get their walk today because I was just meeting after meeting. I work remotely from home. But tonight after dinner, I just said to my husband, I'm gonna slip out of here and just take the dogs. I'm lucky we live in a really pretty area and take him a walk, and he said, "That's fine, on you go," So it's lucky I do have that kind of support behind me. Not everybody has that. So if you're in circumstances where you maybe don't have that as much, it might be wait until your kids are in bed at night, and then just making a promise to yourself that the phone gets put down, you have that bath, or you have that nice cup of tea or something you enjoy, or just taking a moment. Because I mean, even we're saying 20 minutes to half an hour, sometimes even 5-10 minutes can make all the difference of just taking a breather. Or stepping outside. Sometimes I quite often I just step out the back and and just take a breath here at our house and just sit outside for 5 minutes, with a big jacket on. So, and watch the dogs playing. It's little things, it's the wee things that can make all the difference to your mental health and, your well-being.
No, I think you're definitely right. And now I think we've talked about why that's so important, but I'm curious, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. So, you
No.
don't feel like you have to put on your teacher hat or anything, but I'm curious of, why do you think this is, like, from a psychologist standpoint? Why do you think that women put this, I guess, pressure on themselves, or why do we have these crazy expectations of ourselves that, even having 5 or 10 minutes feels like we're doing something wrong? Where does that come from, or where does that start?
I mean, gosh, we could go into, philosophy here. We could get into the evolution here. I think it's maybe a mixture of all, but I think we're tuned in that way. Women are, for the majority of females, we are carers, we are caregivers. Um, I don't know what you were like when your little girl was little, but you know, my kids could cry or make a noise and I was incredibly in tune to it, whereas my husband didn't have that same sense as me, whereas I'd be like, I can't ignore that. I can't ignore it. And I still can't to this day. And I sometimes think there's an evolution behind that where you see like animals in the wild and the females just like, oh, I have to care for my young, and the other lions away out like, meeting more lion females, you know what I mean, and eating things. And I think that's kind of like, you have to look at it that way a little bit in a sense. We just care for our young, we care for our children for the most part. That's what we do. And I think it's some of it is genetics and wiring. It's just who we are as people. But I think we also, as the focus has never been more so than now, the focus is a lot about, especially coming out this pandemic now, is about self-care and looking after yourself, you know. And a lot of people, most of us have spent 18 months or so at home, or 2 big lockdowns now in the case of the UK, Scotland. And, you know, we've spent a lot of time in our house, maybe not even working or being furloughed or whatever, depending on your circumstance. So you've had more time to do these things. And what I'm hoping is, as a result of that, you know, there's people that have went, well, I'm not going to let that slip. I'm going to keep that up now. But again, just to answer your question, I think it's our wiring. I think most of us are just built that way, that we care for our, you know, others sometimes more than ourselves. And we watch the women who raised us do the same thing. So I think if you're, you know, it's generational, it's how you raise too. You know, if I think of all the women in my family, they just worked, you know, and they never sat down till 9 o'clock at night, you know what I mean? And I suppose in some ways I was quite similar to that until probably the last, you know, few years of my life, where I was just so burned out. And you're like, geez, I'm burned out and I'm in my early 40s. That's a big sign of like a red flag. You know what I mean? I hope I'm not bumbling away here. I hope I'm making some sense to you and your listeners.
No, absolutely. I think what you said makes a lot of sense. We do, a lot of us anyways, tend to have these kind of characteristics, and maybe they become stereotypes of our gender. But then if you think, maybe most women do tend to, you know, exhibit these behaviors or talk about feeling this way. And then the other thing that you said about, you know, it's generational, and it's what did you see your mom do or your grandmother do, or even what does society around you tell you to do? And I think the message, it's maybe getting a little bit better, but the message is very much that like the women are the primary caregivers of the children, and we're kind of expected to just do everything. And we don't have one priority. For us, it's like, well, we're supposed to have a perfectly clean house and, you know, dinner cooked and laundry done and happy kids, and but we're also supposed to work and run a business. And it goes back to that thing you said about having it all, and how like it's just not realistic. You cannot be 110% on top of all of these different things, because that's too much for one human being.
Yeah. And then also, like, to, you know, not to get too much information, but when you say, like, you know, just to take care of your husband and look after his needs, and it's just like, well, wait a minute, where do I matter in all of this? What is, you know? And I think, you know, I was lucky that when I married, you know, Stephen's my second husband, but when I married him, I was really honest about if we were going to have a family together, that I really had an expectation about, I need you to be really hands-on, which that wasn't the case for him years ago, because he has children from another marriage. So, you know, he constantly worked, and he was not around a lot when his older son was born, because he was working all the time to keep, you know, the mortgage and everything else going. So this time around, it was really different for him even, but it didn't just magically know what to do. I almost had to kind of say to him, well, this is the help I'm going to need. You know, it wasn't like he was like, well, suddenly I'm just going to be able to do this. And it's so funny trying to teach a man to, no offense here, but to try and teach somebody to multitask who hasn't multitasked. Because I noticed that too, that there's a tendency, I think females can be a little better at multitasking sometimes than males, not all, but yeah, it's kind of like, hey, I can put a thing of laundry on and empty the dishwasher and, you know, get the kids going and say to them, get in the bath or the shower, whereas it's like, there's, you know, so it's really interesting, you know, like just the roles have changed over the years, because my dad didn't do any of that stuff. He would be the first to tell you he didn't either. He was working all the time. My mum done everything. My grandmother done everything. Well, the men worked. So
yeah, I think a lot of it is probably what you grew up around. And I think my husband's very hands-on with our daughter, but his dad is actually like that, which I think is quite uncommon for that generation. And I don't know, obviously I wasn't around when you know, when he was raising my husband Paul, but the way that I see him with Charlie, he's like a very hands-on grandparent as well. And it's just, and I really wonder that sometimes, if Paul's so hands-on, if it's, you know, because of seeing his dad, or, you know, if there's just something in him that wants to be hands-on. It's really interesting, all this stuff. And you do start to think, how much of this is evolutionary, how much of it is learned, how much is observed? I don't know.
probably mixture of both, Paul, you know, just a different thing. But also, if he's seen his dad, you know, be very hands-on with him, etc., then that's something that's perhaps important to him, that he's the same for his kids. I know for my husband, it was more of like, I feel like I didn't get to do as many things as I would have liked. I don't think he feels guilty. I think he just recognizes, hey, I was working a lot, and that was the agreement. And my wife at the time was at home with our boy, and you know. But I think for this time around, he was just like, you know, no, I want to be much more involved, and I was like, fine.
Well, and this
do.
is one of the things that's quite good about being self-employed. Obviously, your husband's self-employed as well.
Yeah.
And I think it does give you a little bit more flexibility. You know, it's one of the pros. It's, you know, it can be a challenge as well, but it does give you that flexibility. My girlfriends that have kids the same age as Charlie are all talking about, what are we going to do in school next year? The ones that work 9 to 5 are like, you know, we're going to have to figure out before and after school care because their works aren't flexible. And I'm kind of thinking, well, that is one benefit of my job, is I can say, right, I'm finishing work at 3 to get her from school. And then, yeah, chances are when she goes to bed, I'll probably be back on the computer for an hour or two, but I have the flexibility to do that. And it's not somebody else dictating, you know, that I have to have my bum in a chair for, you know, the same 8 hours. So
Yeah.
there are definitely some pros, but I don't want to keep you too long, but I wanted to ask you one more thing to kind of tie all of this together, because we've talked a lot about, I guess, the challenges of trying to have it all. I'm using air quotes here, not that anybody can see, but we've talked a lot about that challenge and sort of some different perspectives on that. And you've shared your own experience, but also sort of from a psychologist perspective, which is great. But I'm curious then if you have any tips or advice or any sort of practical things to share, whether it's things that you've learned through your own experience or through your work, about managing these self-expectations and I guess the pressure that we put on ourselves. How can we overcome that or deal with that, or how can we kind of improve that?
Well, I think if I was to say anything to your listeners, and it's advice or guidance that I've been given myself, is, you know, if you are feeling constantly guilty and incredibly overwhelmed, I think it's about taking a step back and having a honest look at your life, and an honest survey, I guess, if you want to say, of looking at what's going on in your life. That, you know, I'm a great believer in the mind, body, and the soul all is connected. So normally, something will tell us when we're off. So it's either, you know, your mind or your body, like you're getting unwell, or you just don't feel good about yourself, or you just kind of feel a bit checked out. And, you know, I don't know about you, but sometimes I've just felt like I've been going through the motions, but I'm not really enjoying life. It's just like I'm going from A to B to C to D because that's what I'm meant to do. So I think that it's really having an inventory of what it is that you feel is going on. And if you're not able to do that, which a lot of us aren't, because be objective about yourself, and then go see someone about it. Talk to someone. I think there's still a stigma around mental health. Obviously, there's still a stigma about having a therapist. And I'm quite happy to share that I've got someone that I see every couple of weeks, and I look forward to it. It's an objective point of view. It's someone that's not emotionally attached to me, and she can help discuss with me and guide me through things. It's me that makes the decisions, but she can keep me in check, I guess. And so, you know, I would definitely encourage that. Or if you're not really comfortable with that, then it's taking a kind of moral inventory of what might be going on with you. Write it down, you know, mind, body, and soul. Look at it, take a look, and ask yourself, like, how do I feel in those 3 areas of my life? Am I content? Am I not? And if the answer is no to one of them, or you feel like one is slightly off, then there is help out there for you. It might not be seeing someone. It might be getting a really good book from Amazon, or asking a friend about, you know, someone who's in our area, or getting on Google and looking up some of the websites to do with psychology. There's loads of stuff you can do that's self-care, that's looking after yourself that you don't need to see a professional about. And so I just encourage your listeners to